The year was 1397. I served as banner blade to King Atarexis III, conqueror of the moon and sun. The scene I wish to tell you of was a tournament, held during a very short and very warm summer. The event I recall quite well took place during the melee. This year was an exception to most, due to the open registration of fighters. Anyone could participate. Peasant folk, knights, lords, even exotic and foreign warriors. No special placements were allowed, and no blood duels could be resolved within. That particular day unsettled my stomach. 2 opponents were set to duel each other. The first was Sir Glandenbury, our venerable lord who proved himself in over 3 very bloody campaigns. He was mean, vain, and brutish. More feared than respected, that's for certain. The second man was Sir Pick. 10 years his junior, Pick came from a long line of heroes. He was seen by some as foolish and perhaps blunt in his speech, but he possessed a charm that won the hearts of all men and women of all stations. He was certainly loved by the people. Though not as battle-proven as his opponent, Pick was charged with protecting the northern coast, and of course he boasted in comical fashion his valiant efforts of overseeing a calm and empty sea. But despite Pick's magnetism, Glandenbury was interested in only one thing. His only son died on the distant border of Charter, land signed over to the forces in the region by a fleeing empire whom did not see fit to name whom the land was entitled to, and as a result, many kingdoms, this is of course including my own, were feuding over it. Glandenbury's son left years ago with the aim to win the land for Atarexis III, but unfortunately the lad fell in the midst of battle. Glandenbury's disposition transmuted from cruel to monstrous, and he sought to fill that emptiness by killing anyone he could get away with. He already claimed 3 victims in the tournament in the most gruesome and disgusting fashion, and now he sought to claim Sir Pick next. There was nothing I could do to intervene. The placements were already set and house banners flown. But perhaps it was the gods of old or the spirits of the new. Something was on my side that day. The king had decided to ask his personal kipper, a finicky boy of 15 named Albert, to act as marshal for this melee. Young Albert would of course not dare refuse an honor from his king. But when I saw that this pudgy boy entered the arena, he was sweating in his leather, shaking his longsword, I flexed every meager portion of my duty, and I kneeled before the stalwart, golden-haired king. "Let me take the place of this boy, your grace. His nerves shall get the better of him. I've seen enough young men buckle in my day, and I would rather risk my own life than risk this boy unknowingly embarrass your own appointment." The king knew exactly what I meant. Now, whether it was for the show, or for the sake of honor, or perhaps even some other reason that he would never say in public, he nodded. "Done," he said. "Make sure these 2 don't kill each other too badly. Albert, remove your pin and get over here. Now!" I took the marshal's pin from the teenage boy, and I suited myself up with a simple breastplate, and armed myself with a light, flanged mace. If Glandenbury was to be stopped honorably, I needed something to hit him swiftly, and with enough force to stun him. I did not wish to kill him, only disable him. I entered the arena to the sounds of murmuring onlookers, whispers of excited children, and the occasional giggle of maidens. Sir Pick played very well to crowds, I had to give him that. He tossed beautiful, gorgeous roses to them, and he hollered, "Most of those are for the women!" And, of course, the crowd roared with laughter. Now Lord Glandenbury, he was not amused. He craved the taste of blood, not roses, and certainly not praise. Evil wrinkles formed across his brow. I stood in the center, and I stuck out my weapon, calling for both men to ready themselves. The menacing lord was armed with a very wicked black morning star and a haughty shield. Sir Pick was armed with a long and very noble Zweihander, and both were well protected in lavish bullplate, which meant that this was not going to be a simple and short match. "Both honored men are ready to duel?" I asked, and the lord only snorted in response. Sir Pick, on the other hand, he smiled. "I am as ready as my valiant father, my glorious grandfather, and all the heroic greats before him." He waved to the maidens in the crowd, and then shut his visor. I eyed both readied men, and finally I lifted my mace up, taking a step back so that they could commence the fight. There was no hesitation. The Lost Lord charged at the younger knight, swinging his spiked maul. Pick hopped back and aimed his massive sword overhand like a spear to keep him at a distance. Every time he thrust at Glandenbury, the man shoved it off with his shield, and with every block came another closing blow in return. The beloved knight parried and dodged from the swings and kept him at a distance. I watched the crowd ooh and gasp with every strike of steel. Truth be told, it was a great fight to behold. Even the king watched intently, leaning so far forward from his seat he could easily fall over if he weren't gripping it. I knew Atarexis wanted desperately for a show, but even then he was well aware of what could happen if someone did not put a stop to Glandenbury's anger soon. If anyone proved heroic or even foolhardy enough to break the spirit of a monster, it was Sir Pick. But his opponent would not give up without bloodshed. He fought like a beast and only pulled back when Pick shifted his stance to gain some reach. My stomach was in greater knots than before. I gripped my mace hard, and I watched closely, hopping around the battlefield as they fought all over the arena. Hearing the clack and clank of metal on metal did not unnerve me, but being this close to a man fueled by hatred and hungry for flesh kept me off my heels. The two men fought and danced and struck and dodged and swung at each other with such vigor, I'm surprised fire did not erupt from the specks of dried grass underneath them. Pick raised his Zweihander high and began to chop, chop, chop away against the Lord's shield, while finally feinting another chop to only switch the hold on his blade and barrel into the Lord with his knightly prowess. He wedged his blade down and disarmed the shield from the man, swinging his backside into him with enough force to send him stumbling backward. Pick hoped it would be enough to knock the man down, but Glandenbury kept his footing, and somehow recovered quick enough to swing his Morningstar with both hands against a leg left open. Pick fell to the dirt after a loud thunk, and the Lord jumped on him, sending his maul down against the man, slamming into his chest, his arms, his helmet. But the crowd shouted for the goodly knight to get back up and slay the beast. Even the king couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, come on, damn it! Get on your feet!" But I knew what was happening. Despite the valor of Sir Pick, I heard his shout. I yield! I yield!" And he let go of his Zweihander, stretching his arms out to catch the hefty hammer slamming into him. And just as I expected, Lord Glandenbury did not stop. He continued smashing into him, crunching the plates and denting them. I rushed in. "Down, my lord! Cease the attack!" He yielded! But the Lord refused to hear me. He struck his victim again, a guttural bloodlust grunting out of him with every swing. I had no choice but to engage him. As he pulled back for another strike, I grabbed the handle with my offhand, and I swung my mace at the man's visor. He grunted in pain as his nose broke and fell backward, still gripping his Morningstar. "Stay down!" I shouted at him. "He yields!" The Lord clambered to his feet, grunting in frustration. "Get out of my way!" He charged at me with the vicious club and swung high. I dropped low and struck at his shin, sending him to the ground. He hit the dirt hard, but he would not give in. He stood right back up. "I will kill you, pup!" I made sure to shield Sir Peck and shouted back, "The man yields!" The Lord still charged at me. I had hoped exhaustion would set in soon, but the armored devil still fought on. His reputation as a warrior truly preceded him. I avoided his attacks the best I could, and every time I struck I tried to disable him, unfoot him, put him to the ground, but every time the man heaved like a monster and still recovered. He wanted Pick dead, and me with him if he had to. The match would turn into a bloodbath if this continued. I pulled my mace back, and I readied against him. Now it was at that point that King Atarexis himself stood up and dropped into the arena, drawing his own longsword. He shouted at his guards, "Oh, stand down, all of you!" as he marched behind Lord Glandenbury. I felt a beleaguered sense of relief as I watched my own king enter. "Lord Glandenbury," he called out, "drop your weapon, now!" The match snipped, the last strand of reason left tight in the Lord's mind, and the foolish cretin turned around to face the king down. "You! How dare you!" he roared, and he ignored me and Sir Pick completely, and vaulted to his own liege. He brought his Morningstar straight down to crush the king's crown, and everything underneath. But Atarexis III was the conqueror of the moon and sun. Quick as the blink of an eye, he ducked under the man, then lifted up his arm, and shoved his glorious longsword directly underneath his own armpit and through the chest. His bones, his heart, his lungs, all gave way to the shimmering royal steel invading them. Glandenbury grunted for the last time, and began to tremble. In one precise motion the king removed a dagger from his belt, and drove it underneath the torso and into the beast's belly. Lord Glandenbury dropped to his knees, and wept angry tears, and he looked up. "You killed my son," he gurgled, blood gushing from his mouth. "You can't retake Charter. You're weak." The king grabbed him by the hair. "I did not kill your son, you damned fool. Your son chased glory and was crushed by it, and now you have brought the same fate on yourself." The crowd was silent. No one knew what to say or do. My Grace looked at me. "Well, come and finish him off. Don't want to embarrass the appointment of the king now, do we?" I immediately stepped over to the Lord, and I looked down at him. The creature that I had been casting down this entire time and calling monstrous appeared more pathetic and broken than I was prepared for. But my duty got the better of me. My duty would always get the better of me. I dropped my flange mace down upon his skull so hard that it became lodged in it. Blood squirted onto my breastplate. Lord Glandenbury slumped lifeless to the dirt. Sir Pick rose to his feet. Thank you, sir, and I am indebted to you, of course, your grace." But King Attarexis merely waved him off. "I haven't tasted steel in years, good sir," he hummed, as he cleaned off his blade and marched back to his own throne. The guards accompanied him. Sir Peck looked at me. "I fear I would be dead now if it were not for you." All I could think to do was to grab his wrist and hoist it into the air. "Because of the dishonourable actions of Lord Glandenbury against our Grace King Attarexis III, Sir Peck is proclaimed the victor of this match." The crowd slowly remembered their champion, and shouted, whistled, and clapped. I removed my weapon from the offender's skull on the ground and walked out of the arena. I suppose there's not much to be said, really, about the affairs of knights, lords, and kings. Just a bloody mess, all of it.